Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, if I could ask you to please take your seats and silence your mobile devices. And please welcome to the stage your superintendent, Mr. Chris Daly.
Good morning and welcome to our Superintendent's Conference Day. If each of you would please stand for the national anthem to be performed by Senior Grace LeClaire.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket's red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Emma Sohail, and Vice President of the Class of 22, Vincent Lucision.
Hello, teachers and staff. My name is Vincent Lucision, and I'm the Senior Class Vice President. Just wanted to say how grateful I am for all you supporting the seniors and all the students here at Gates Charlie during this past homecoming week. It was so much fun, we couldn't have asked for a better experience. We're so thankful for each and every one of you and are super excited to be back.
I'm Emma Sohail. I'm the president of the senior class at Gates Charlie. I've been going to Gates Charlie since I was in 3rd grade, and I absolutely love it here. On behalf of all the students, I can say that we're very, very excited to be back all 5 days, and we're so grateful for all the hard work that you've done. Regardless of your role at Gates Chili, you're making a difference and truly inspiring excellence for all learners here. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma and Vincent. I also want to take a moment to welcome our Gates Chili High School peer leaders who are with us today. There they are. These students will help guide you to your sessions this morning. Thank you, Spartans, for supporting our staff in their learning. Now, it is my distinct pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker. Dr. Omekongo Dibinga is the upstander, a term many in our district are quite familiar with. His life's mission is to inspire all across the globe to take a stand when they witness an injustice, no matter how small or large. A John Maxwell Team Top 30 speaker, Dr. Dibinga is also an international speaker, trilingual poet, TV talk show host, rapper, and professor of intercultural communication at American University in Washington, D.C. Please join me in giving a warm Spartan Way welcome to Dr. Dibinga.
Thank you so much. Why y'all so quiet? How you doing? You good? What's up? What's up? I'm saying. All right, we can get the slides up. Awesome. So it's kind of said in the bio that I rap a little bit, so I figure, can we start like that? Can we get up? So check it. When I was young, they used to call me a monster. African, bushman, monkey, I was bothered. Used to pick on my clothes. I didn't have Nikes. I didn't have nice bikes, other fancy things. I didn't have much loot, no savings, no trust fund. So walking out my house every day was not fun. Had no heat in the winter, no AC in the hot sun. Next to my bed was rats, leftovers, they got some. Used to wonder why me while seeing on TV, dudes with Beamers, Jaguars, of course Mercedes. Being broke as a kid used to drive me crazy. Hearing the guns at night, I couldn't sleep like a baby. But now I make it plain. I'm writing this on a plane. On my way to Gates Chili for a show, what changed? Well, I stopped making excuses for myself, took blame. You take control of your life, you can do the same. It don't matter you've been abused, grew up with no parents. You dealt with booze, dealt with drugs, wheelchair rampant. Maybe you grew up poor in a house, not a home. Maybe mom's was an addict, papa rolling stone. What you gotta see is life is just testing you out to see if you'll take your life, take the easy route, to see if you'll throw the towel and surrender your soul to a life of crime, a life of lost, life out of control. But if you take a step back, think twice, get some goals. If you focus on your dreams, not your nightmares, yo, you'll see your life get better with your new mindset. Get new experiences that you won't regret. I took control of my life. Now I travel the globe. I met Clinton, Obama, Maya Angelou. I might be an Obama, Maya Angelou. I might be the next man on the cover of O. You take control of your destiny, you never know. I've been on BET, BBC, CNN. I've been to 25 countries, spoke before millions. Now they don't call me a monster lest I'm beasting the flow. They don't call me nothing but the goat at a show. So what can you do if you focus on great? More than me, probably, if you concentrate. Get the haters out your life, stop lifting dead weight, and listen to no one who ever said, wait. You take control of your dreams, develop yourself. If you eat the right foods, develop your health, you'll live the life of your dreams. Trust me, you'll see, because you have nothing but greatness in your destiny. All right, good morning, thank you. All right. That's how I like to start my day. Repeat after me, there can only be one me. Say it like you mean it, there can only be one me. There was no me before me. There will be no me after me. And since I'm the only me that the world will see, I will be the best me that I can be. Give yourselves a round of applause. Awesome, awesome. So that was my goal. I wanted to turn y'all into rappers, and everybody rapped this morning, so we're good. Quick question, is it possible to get the slides on the screen down here as well? If not, it's all good. But I really wanted to start off with that affirmation because really at the end of the day, in order to do this work, in order to be part of this life and to be part of what I call a movement or part of this journey, it's really going to take no less than your best self. It's really going to take no less than your best energy. 99.5 isn't going to do it. Because really when it comes down to it, we're talking about the future of our children. We're talking about the future of our country. We're talking about the future of our planet. When we're doing this work, thank you. When we're doing this work, it's extremely important that we start off on the same page. Because if we start off at different departure points, we're going to end at different destinations. And so while I'm working with you all today and have the honor to be with you all today, departure is that culture exerts a powerful influence in teaching and learning. That's where we're starting from. If you all are in your conversations, different spaces, if you all don't have that enduring understanding from the beginning, which I know you already have here at Gates Chi-Li, even though the wording might be different or whatever, but we're on that same page, that's where we're starting with today, and that's what we're going to do going through the entire day. Now with that, there's three questions that are going to be the framework for what we're doing today. It's also important that when you're looking at these questions as it relates to you and your own cultural journey, because this is going to be more about you than it is going to be about our students today and what we're doing. It's important that you ask yourself these three questions, and you have to ask them in this order. It's when people ask them out of order that we run into a lot of the challenges and even a lot of the backlash we see as it relates to these conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So, first question is simple. Knowledge and understanding of one's own cultural identity promote effective learning and teaching and all of the work that we do, even if you're not educators. How does it affect who you are? Second question, awareness, knowledge, and understanding of the cultural identity of others, especially students, promote effective learning and teaching. And then lastly, how can we establish learning environments that are conscious of culture to create environments where everybody is celebrated and not tolerated? Why do we have to ask these questions in this order? See, when I'm doing this work, whether I'm working with students, whether I'm working with staff throughout a district, whether we're talking about bus drivers, cafeteria workers, superintendents, teachers, physical education teachers, whatever, whether I'm talking with government groups, corporate groups, the questions are the same. And the problem is the same. Many of these places that I go to, they start with question number 2, which is basically assuming that there's nothing wrong with you. You assume that what you think about a particular group of people is just how it is. We don't do a lot of the work needed in society to challenge our own thinking. But we basically want to get into this check a box mentality of how can I understand those people? What do I need to know? And when you look at yourself as the prime, that's when you run into a lot of problems. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to do today is about challenging a lot of the ways in which we were brought up, the ways in which we were taught to look at things in a particular way, and see if there are some changes we can make as it relates to that. Now, some of our ground rules today and in our later sessions when we go into Q&A and all of that, always want you to be willing to surface and explore unconscious beliefs and values. I want you to be able to listen to hear, not respond. Some people say that makes great marriage and relationship advice. I'm still working on that, according to what my wife tells me. Be willing to think about situations and issues with a new or expanded perspective. Be mindful that your truth can be different for and from others. Honor confidentiality. Take responsibility for your own learning. And, we just be nice to each other. Now, as you could tell from my name, Ome Congo, so my full name, it can't fit on Twitter, okay? I didn't even put it here. My full name is Ome Congo Luhaka wa Debengo Waingeka Kese Washington Casa. And as you can tell, I was born in a very faraway place called Boston, Massachusetts. And I want to prove that even though I'm from the Bean, my New York family's going to love me, right? Because it's all love, right? That's what I'm saying? Yes, awesome. I don't even got to do anything else. I'm good. Just wanted to feel that energy so I can go home and let people know that I got love in New York. But I really love y'all. I really love everything that y'all are doing. I just think it's really awesome and amazing. So I like what Herb Cole said when he talked about not learning. Cole said, not learning tends to take place when someone has to deal with unavoidable challenges to his or her personal and family loyalties, integrity, and identity. In such situations, there are forced choices and no apparent middle ground. To agree to learn from a stranger who doesn't respect your integrity causes a major learn and reject the stranger's world. That's where we are today in society. A lot of us choosing not to learn. Anybody know what agnotology means? It's all good. Agnotology, A-G, I feel like fabulous for those who know hip-hop. A-G-N-O-T-O-L-O-G-Y. Agnotology. Agnotology is the study of culturally produced doubt. Think about like the tobacco industry in 1969 where they said, doubt is our product. When people were talking about the dangers of smoking, like that's kind of where we are today, where people can create doubt about so many things and we automatically choose just not to learn. And as people who are involved in education and people who are involved in producing future leaders, we just can't be about that life. Parker Palmer says, when I don't know myself, I can't even know who my students are. I will see them through a glass darkly in the shadows of my unexamined life. And when I cannot see them clearly, I cannot teach them well. Thinking about all of my experiences coming up through the school system and people who care to know nothing about my culture, who care to know nothing about my name. I just gave you that long name. But in order for people to just have me want to blend in, they were just like, forget all of that. Your name is O. I got poems about that too, but they're not edited, so I'm not going to share that. But, that's later when I come back and we do the open mic, the Gates Satellite open mic night. But I'm sitting here like, seriously? You don't even want to care to know my story? My parents being Congolese? And I'm named after the person who saved my grandfather's life as a child, who was a warrior in my father's community? Like, that means nothing to you? I'm just O? But if these teachers and staff and other people didn't care to know who they were, why would they care to know who I am? And that was one of my major problems coming up in our school system. Einstein said, the world we've created is a product of our thinking. We can't change things until we change our thinking. Donna Ford said, the less we know about each other, the more we make up. And an anonymous quotation I like to share is, we make up our minds quickly and we change them slowly. And unfortunately, it can have disastrous consequences. Now, some of you all may have seen the bio. Some of the stuff was read about me and everything. I've been to a lot of places, almost 30 countries. I've been to all of these, schools, studied at, degrees at, Harvard, the Morehouses, MITs, and all of these things. I'm speaking to a group of students at a conference once, and the only thing the students saw who read my bio was that I was a rapper. So when I walk into the room, the student says, hey, everybody, look, we got a pimp in the house. So I'm turning around looking for the pimp. And they're all looking at me. And so I'm like, wow, like I never had like pimp in the bio, like anywhere. Now like reform pimp, wannabe pimp, rap about pimping, like nothing. But that was what they took because they made up their mind quickly and changed it slowly. Only had like the images of the Snoop and the 50s in their minds. What do we need to do? What mindsets do we need to work to break in order to take ourselves, in order to take our students, our parents, our community to the next level? Somerset Maugham said, men and women are not only themselves, they are also the region in which they were born, the city, apartment, or farm in which they learned to walk, the games they played as children, the old wives' tales they overheard, the food they ate, the schools they attended, the sports they followed, the poems they read, the God they believe in. Like all of these things make us up, but we don't want to spend a lot of time looking at that. So in order for us to be engaged and fully embracing this work, we have to be energized in order to really get deep into these conversations and to really start to analyze what those quotations were talking about. And so in order to do this work, I got to ask you, how do you start your day, right? Because this is doing the motivation. So I was trained by a motivational speaker named Les Brown. And he always talks about, like, how do you start your day? How do you engage your energy? Because in order to do this work, remember when I said 99.5 won't do? You got to start off your day in a positive spirit in order to be engaged in the work that we need to do. So whether you're picking up kids at school in the morning, if you're a driver, you're the first representative of this district that that child is seeing for the day, right? How do we start that day? If you're the principal meeting them at the school, first person they see when they walk in the door, that's you, that's the energy you're bringing. But look, I'm going to tell y'all start the day off watching the news, you ain't going to be in the right mindset. Let me hook you up with some basic facts. The news is three things: death, weather, and traffic. In that order. Woke up this morning, and I do my motivational thing, get my mind right, turn on the TV, first thing I'm seeing is about, some killing that happened here. And now, look, you got phones. You got a weather app. You can go straight to the app and check the weather. You can avoid all of the other news. Like, give yourself a window between, 10 a.m. and, 1 p.m. to consume all of that. Because I got news for you. Breaking news in the morning is going to be breaking news at night. So even in the 24-hour news cycle, we're getting the same story right. Whether it's exercising, whether you're a religious person reading your text, whether it's listening to a particular song, hanging out with kids who are around you, you got to put the energy in right. Because if you don't, you're going to fall prey to whatever all of the negativity out there is going to bring your way. You remember when social media used to actually be social? But now it's like anti-social media. People just wake up going to look for a fight. Some of y'all be doing that too. I see some of y'all out there. We got to be better than that. We got to be better than that. Stephen Covey said you can't talk your way out of a problem that you behaved your way into. We're here as a society because we behaved our way here. When we talk about issues relating to racism, sexism, homophobia, all of these issues, we put ourselves here. And so we got to be willing to do the work to break that cycle. And we have to be willing to change ourselves first. So I'm going to be touching on a lot of different issues here and in the breakout sessions. One of the main issues I want to start to kind of lead this conversation is how do we engage in our conversations we have relating to race? So I want to do this activity. I got my clock here to do a timer. We're going to take 2 minutes. You're going to pick a partner, and you're going to answer this little statement here. I want you to tell the person next to you who you are. All of the things that make up who you are. Are you a mom, a dad, a soccer player, Celtics fan? Anything. Just that was random. You didn't hear that. A dancer, a boxer, a teacher. All of the things that make up who you are in 1 minute. I want you to tell that to your neighbor. All right, ready, set, to your neighbor. All right, ready, set, go. Okay, let's switch. Make sure the other person goes. Keep the music going. Make sure the other person has time to go with this last minute.
If I told y'all I was just gonna go pull up God, 3 bodies I'm gonna have to have my schedule, maybe the fuck, at the top, not big, but I got my maybe if I told y'all I used to spend every day, I used to spend
Okay, we can wrap it up. Bring it back. We can wrap it up. Bring it back. Now, first of all, I got to thank you for the beat. I was about to stop rhyming to that. I was like, all right, pump that up. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe during lunchtime or something, we'll come back and do a little show. I'm just saying, music does that to me. So let me ask you a question by a show of hands. How many of you all learned something new about, and some of y'all may know each other, sitting next to each other. Some of y'all may be sitting next to somebody you don't know. I'm going to assume many of you all know each other because, you're sitting next to each other. But even still with that, how many of you all learned something new about the person you were talking to? Raise your hand. And you see, that's the point. You learn these things because it's very possible you're sitting next to somebody you don't know. But some of y'all, how many of y'all are sitting next to somebody you know and you learn new stuff about them? So there we go again. Going off of this idea that the less we know about people, the more we make up. Some of y'all would have never assumed that the person next to you might be a preacher or, a vegan or adopted or anything like that. Challenge, you see, everyday discrimination, it takes place based on what we did in this slight exercise. But unfortunately, entire races, gender, community groups, religious groups, and more have been denied opportunities and misperceptions just based on these quick judgments that we make about other people. So we have to understand the importance of being grounded in who we are and then working to understand other people. Because unfortunately, with too many times, we do it with our students as well. Making up things about them as soon as they walk in the door, when we see how they're dressed, when we hear their accent, where we think about what part of town that they came from, or even sometimes basing the judgment off of your thoughts of their siblings that you saw before them, negatively or positively. We got to do the work to start to understand each person as individuals, whether we're talking about our colleagues, whether we're talking about parents, whether we're talking about staff. So as we're having these conversations, most likely people are only going to see 2 to 3 things when they look at you. Younger black male, older white woman, whatever, light-skinned person in a wheelchair, like whatever they are, they're not going to take the time to go deeper, to do that deeper dive. And so when we have these conversations with diversity, we see that a lot because a lot of people only look at diversity as race and gender. And a lot of people are just tired of talking about either one of those things. Or don't even, they tired, but some of them, they haven't even started, but they tired somehow. It's interesting. I was like, yo, for real? Like, can you at least open your eyes, see the name of the book? I mean, it's just like, come on, dude. But we have to understand, and one of the things I love about reading all of your literature and the things that Gates Child Eye is doing is that you all have been ahead of the curve. I was telling Suzanne earlier, y'all have been so ahead of the curve from a lot of other places in putting this out there and putting this language out there. Because there are lots of factors of diversity that you and all of your students encompass. Whether we're talking language, economic status, learning style, etc. And I got some blank pieces of the pie there because we always have to make new room for things that we don't know about. We all know that people who are part of the transgender community have been here, have always been here, right? But as it relates to these conversations about DEI stuff, if we're being honest, they didn't really start to enter mainstream conversations until probably the last 10 years in terms of those of us who do this work. And so a lot of us who didn't know much about it had to learn more about it, had to become more proficient in it. Because it wasn't about our arrogance and thinking we got it all figured out. It was about what do we do to make sure that these students feel like they belong as well. Particularly since they're one of the highest groups of experiencing some of the highest rates of suicide in this country as well. We have to make room for that. I think that at the end of the day, we have to understand that when we're doing this work, words that we use matter. And too many of us don't want to engage in conversation because we get triggered by particular words. So let's just look at this. Just in your mind, in your spirit, what comes to you? How do you feel? What is your visceral reaction when I put up some of the words I'm about to share right now? Black Lives Matter. What comes up? All lives matter. Blue lives matter. critical race theory, which is interesting because growing up in the 90s, I've read all of these guys. And I can guarantee you that what people call critical race theory, what it actually is, knowing the people who actually created it, because that's like a thing. I do definitions, like I do words, I do like literal things. It's not being taught in school, especially on the K-12 level. We're talking about something created by actual people, Derek Bell, Kimberly Crenshaw, Richard Delgado, so on and so forth, for like law school students to just look at America's policies and they affected it from a racial lens for law school students. Like that's what it is. But because we have these trigger words, society today, we just use it as like a blanket thing to cover anything that teaches about race. Or even like anything black and brown. I saw one school district who was like banning CRT. They banned a book on Malala. Like, for real? Like, Malala Yousafzai, like, the teenage activist, like, what's the correlation? Kids' books on Rosa Parks? Like, a kid's book on Rosa, but that's what happens when we get caught up. So that's become a trigger word for a lot of people, as has white replacement theory. There's another theory that's getting a lot of attention in the news today. What's the trigger? What do you think of when you think woke? How do you feel? Free speech, reparations, Second Amendment, Republicans, Trump, Biden, and of course, they're all controversial. There's a trigger there, see? You ain't the greatest, LeBron. He's definitely on the list. But even athletes, when we bring up things, it can be triggering. But you have to do the work to understand what's behind the triggering and how does it affect what it is that you do and what you bring to the table, and how can we do work to be better as it relates to that. And so we have to understand that a lot of this stuff comes down to our perceptions. What is that? Chalice. Two people talking. One of my students said the Eucharist. Like anybody else? Eucharist. They see all of these things. And I'm like, okay, that was interesting. What's that? Yes? Duck, okay. Yes? Okay, let's go back. How many people see the cup? The black cup, the top, and so on and so forth. How many people see two people looking at each other, right? How many people who thought one thing now see the other thing, right? How many people see the rabbit? How many people see the duck? I've been doing this for a while. I had one student who actually saw a turtle. So the question becomes, how do y'all see the turtle? Anyone see the turtle now? The head coming out of the shell and like the back of the turtle. I've never heard that before or since. But the question becomes, who am I to say? But now, how many of y'all see the turtle now? See? I got you. But that's the point, right? The point is, all of us in this society are looking at the same thing. But the way we're wired has us looking at them differently. When we have these conversations relating to DEI, the question becomes, can we make room to accept what the other person sees and build a conversation from there? So many people talk about the importance of walking a mile in my shoes, but the part they leave out, in order to walk a mile in someone else's shoes, you got to take your shoes off first before you put those other shoes on. But we're so caught up and not willing to do that we get caught up. We'll get into fights over, that's a rabbit, that's a duck, that's a cup, that's just two people. People will argue over all of that. That's critical race theory. That's Black Lives Matter. That's Blue Lives Matter. And what are we doing with that? What room are we making to open things up? One of the things we have to do, when I said earlier about getting to the same point of departure, we have to make sure that we're doing the work to define the isms, all right? Because even if I was to go around and ask a question, we're not going through all of these definitions now, but if I was to walk through and ask you about each one of these words, sexism, Islamophobia, microaggressions, whatever, I might get 800 different definitions. You got to be on the same page. Maybe like literally have a dictionary that you all work together on if you don't have it already. And if you have it, you got to add new terms to it. Because if I'm talking about racism and you're talking about systemic racism, we're having two different conversations. You're talking individual, I'm talking about a system of power. When we talk about isms, all isms are is prejudice plus power. There's a difference between being prejudiced and being racist. There's a difference between being biased and being sexist. If I don't like women and I don't have the power to do anything about it, I just got a prejudice. I just got a bias, right? Words matter. But I'm a professor, American University. If I decide that all of the women in my class, no matter how much they outperform the males, are not going to get hired in, say, a B+, then I'm adding power to my prejudice and I'm practicing sexism. Like, words matter. And we need to be able to break these things down to the base level. One of the things I can't stand is seeing these pundits on television talk about this stuff because the hosts of these shows, they never define the term so that they're talking about. So these guys, they end up not even talking at each other. They're just talking to their social media base because they don't really care what the other person thinks about it. We can't do that in a school district. So when we're talking about racism, we're talking about that belief that race is a primary determinant of human traits and capacities, racial difference produce an inherent superiority of a particular race. But when we talk about systemic racism, we're talking about that formalization of a set of institutional, historical, cultural, interpersonal practices within a society that more often than not puts one social or ethnic group in a better position to succeed. And at the same time, disadvantages other groups in a consistent and constant manner that disparities develop between the groups over a period of time. But if I'm talking about that and you're just talking about, oh, you're calling me racist, you're never going to go anywhere. Get on common ground. Get on common ground. And when we talk about anti-racism, which we'll talk about a little bit more later, practice of opposing racism and promoting racial acceptance, not tolerance. Remember, we want celebration, not toleration. All right? So when we look at some of these issues, we have to understand, when we talk about race, and you do a deeper dive into it, have you ever thought about this? We might do this in the second session, the breakout sessions, to think in your life. The first time, I should say. What's attached with the memory? Did you talk to anyone about the encounter? What if I flip that? Reflection on religion, reflection on gender, reflection on economic status, on sexual orientation. These are the types of things that a lot of us, we suppress them because the experiences were so negative that we don't even want to think about them. But we have to do this work. You know why? Because our kids who are coming here every day are dealing with this stuff now just like you did. How do we reach them? How do we speak about it? Do we encourage them to suppress who they are? We know that doesn't work. We're going to lose them from jump. So we have to understand that. Y'all should be doing that work individually and then in your groups, that's your teams, to really break it down. It's also going to help you better know each other and understand each other as well. So when we do that, we have to understand that sometimes we have challenges to doing this work. Some of us have this assimilationist idea. Hey, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. And the problem with that is that we're having people lose who they are when they walk into the building. Instead of Mekongo Luhaka wa Debinga, just and forget your culture. And if you look at some of the work from Mark Williams, The 10 Lenses, Your Guide to Living and Working in a Multicultural World, he talks a lot about that, right? And then if you look at some of the, another lens that people have is that, because we don't want to have this assimilationist mentality. We want to move towards that culturally relevant mentality, right? Which we'll talk a little bit more about in the next session. Some of us have a colorblind lens. Anyone ever heard that one? I'm colorblind. When I see you, I see a person, I don't see color. I'm like, if you don't see color, how do you stop at the traffic light? Like, what do you do when you get to the intersection? That's not red, that's not green, I don't see color. Like, for real? You know what I'm saying? Like, and the belief system is nice. We want to believe and preach and practice equality, but the problem is you might actually be denying something that is central to somebody else's well-being and who they are. The reasons why they might tense up when a police officer rolls up behind them and you may not have that experience. You might be denying all of that. And that's a real problem for many people. So the intent might be nice, but the impact can be horrific. Particularly for students who might be dealing with these particular issues on a daily basis. And sometimes in our schools, right? It's a real problem. I believe, as Sleater said, that if a teacher is insisting on being colorblind, and the teacher is putting herself or himself in a position of saying, I don't know about the student's background. I don't believe that's really important, and I'm not going to learn about it. And some of us have definitely witnessed that. Here are some terms, right, that talk about the diversity of different cultures, because you got all of this coming to your school. You know, because we have this idea of Protestant work ethic, you know, do things my way or the highway, make your bed and lie in it. But people are coming in from different cultures with different ideas. The idea that a boat does not go forward if each one is rowing his own way. A successful person should help others realize their good ideas. Closed mouth swallows no flies. Like, if our kids are coming in with these different types of mentality, but we have a system in our society in the U.S. where we do things a little bit differently, and we don't explain that and build that with our students, they're going to be lost. And if we just assume, like I said from the beginning, the less we know about each other, the more we make up, that they're just slow, they're just behind, and so on and so forth, then they're going to stay behind. That's how they're going to be tracked. And that can be extremely problematic. So as we wrap up and go into some of these questions and answers, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts about things. We have to make sure that we're continually doing the work. Building our library of authors, building our library of documentaries and videos, and all of the stuff that we're doing that's going to really help us to first understand ourselves so that we can better understand our students. I love this from Carmen. It says, listen, Carmen, we want you to think for yourself, but you have to follow the required curriculum. If this conflicts with your core beliefs, you have to keep it to yourself. So what you're saying is that you're all for diversity as long as it's not too diverse. And the principal says, and they say, we're not teaching you. Our kids pick up on this stuff. They pick up on the stereotypes. I was at one school where this kid was walking down the hallway. It was a high school. And the teacher saw the kid and said, like, get this class, keep studying, do well. And he was like, yes, Ms. Johnson, blah, blah, blah. As soon as he turned a corner, the principal said, he's going to make a great prisoner one day. That's what I did. First thing that came to my mind is that you have no business in this school. Second thing that came to my mind was that I'm pretty sure that student got that message as well, despite all of your smiles and best intentions. So we'll come back to this part later. I want to play something with you all, and then I'm going to take some questions. I like what Derek Bell said, one of the founders of critical race theory. Our actions are not likely to lead to best efforts be of more help to the system we despise than to the victims of that system whom we're trying to help. If we're not going to do the work to better ourselves, we're going to be continually part of the problem and not the solution. We have to understand the importance of going from allies to partners. I don't like the word allyship anymore. Like, allies are like fans who go to the game, cheer. The team loses, they go home. Partners are on the same team working for a common goal. And that's where we need to be shifting our mindset to as it relates to being partners. So I wrote this book called Grow Towards Your Greatness, 10 Steps to Living Your Best Life. And I want to leave you with these 4 steps. They stand for give, release, overcome, and win. So when we're doing this work, we got to do these 4 steps to continually build our work as upstanders and not bystanders, and to really be about this life, all right? So I love this when I see what you have here on your website when it talks about equity and inclusion here at Gates Child Life. So I don't have to read that, but it's in line with this conversation that we're having. And also what I'm talking about, it's in line with some of your principles that you impart on your students as well. So I like what Brian Tracy said, your comfort zone is your danger zone, so let's get uncomfortable. So we have to give. Everybody say give. Say it like you mean it, give. We got to give our time as engaged listeners in order to build these communities where everybody is celebrated and not tolerated. Too many times in conversations about race and so many other things, we're quick to want to make our points that we don't even want to hear what the other person is saying. We got 2 ears and 1 mouth. We got to use them in proportion. Question becomes, how can we be better listeners today because we don't got it all figured out? All of us have more work to do. Myself, all of us. We got to do that. Somebody say release. We got to say, what? Release. We got to learn how to let go of preconceived notions. Letting go of those things that we were taught. We may not be responsible for what we're taught, but for what we have learned, but we are responsible for unlearning once we get exposed to new information. Let go of people who don't represent where you claim you want to go. If you're surrounded by 5 racists, you're racist number 6. If you're surrounded by 7 sexists, you're sexist number 8. There's like no middle ground. Social media. Why are people feeling more comfortable posting stuff on your page that they know they can't go to someone else's page and put up? Because you make them feel comfortable. People doing things like the George Floyd challenge where they're reenacting his killing and putting it in their social media spaces. Can they do that on your page? Can they put up something that's anti-Semitic or homophobic and get it on your page for laughs? We got to start understanding that our silence is compliance. And we got to start with that mentality of not here, not ever again. Everybody say overcome. We got to overcome the fear of speaking up. Speaking up, taking a stand, it takes courage. In some positions, some people have lost their jobs, but look, at the end of the day, fear is nothing but false evidence appearing real, F-E-A-R. Most of the things we worry about won't happen. And when you're part of a district that wants to do this work, it becomes a whole lot easier, because trust me, I've seen some spaces where people do not want to do this work. And it's a challenge for that small group of teachers and staff and other people who want to make a difference. And then we have to ask ourselves, what are we willing to do to fight for equality? What are we willing to do to put ourselves in positions where we can be part of that change? Which leads us to win. Everybody say win. We just got to have a winning mentality. Understanding that we will win if we do not give in. We have to understand that deciding not to decide is a decision. When you just say, hey, we're not going to talk about this subject in class today, that class that might be central to that child's life, and what's going on in their world, that's a decision to ignore that person's reality. And you have to understand at the end of the day, all you're doing is minimizing them. I believe that we are called to do this. I believe that this is not just a job. I believe that we have to be mission-oriented as it relates to doing this work. There's a poem that I want to end this session with, but I'm going to save it until after we take some questions. So, but before we do that, I want to play a quick game. Let's do this. I've done this across the country. Nobody has ever won. Ready to make history. Let's do it. All right. Living. They have to be living. LeBron. Mike. Cam. Men. Westbrook. Bryce. I need 5 men. We got LeBron. Jim Brown. Thank you, got it. I need 2 more. Who? Oh, got you, yes. And Magic Johnson, yes. Somebody said Tiger. We'll take him too. I say that because when he talks, he acts like he don't want to take us. And I'm like, yo, you one of us, man. We got you. We're claiming you. I'm just saying. All right, here we go. Musicians, living. Jigga. I teach a class on Jay-Z. Come take my class at American. John Legend. Pharrell. Lamar. Love. Weekend. 4 more. Bridges. Roots. 2 more. J. Cole. 1 more. Drake. Yes. We're getting there. We're making history. Yes. Actors. Okay, Idris Elba and Denzel Washington. You always start with those 2. So give me 8 more. Y'all got issues. You got issues. Taye Diggs. Morgan Freeman. Rock. Will Smith. Yes, thank you. I need 3 more. Jordan. Michael B. Jordan. Samuel Jackson. 1 more. Jamie Foxx. Awesome. 3 more categories. Here we go. They got to be living. Authors. Oh. Ooh. You're nice. Okay. 9 more. Jason Wells. Thank you. Kwame Alexander. Bo Willems. I got 4. LeBron James. Okay, this is where we start repeating. Okay. I guess he got a book. 5 more. Jason Reynolds. Cornel West. Jakes. Thank you. I need one more. Obama. Yes. Here we go. 2 more. Educators. Okay, I'll take it. Here's the repeat. You. Okay, 2. One Brown. I love it. No doubt. Hey, you know what I'm saying? Like, why not? If not you, then who, right? I'm just saying. Got it. Yep. Okay. 5 more. Tyson. Yes. Absolutely. 2 more. Colin Powell. Got it. We got it. This is it. This is the last one. Are we ready? We'll take him. We'll take Ben Carson. Dr. Dre doesn't count. Sorry, I can't hear you. Yep, that's 2. Like medical doctors, medical. We already said Carson. Surgeon General is, yes, okay. But we don't know his name though. Okay. Come on. Living. The concussions guy from the Will Smith movie. Okay. No doubt. So here's the thing. I'm not a medical doctor or scientist, but thank you. All right, we almost made history. The challenge, y'all, is that we can't teach what we don't know. We can't lead where we don't go. I could have switched this for women. I could have switched this for Asian. I could have switched this for Muslim. I could have switched this for anything. And some people say, well, I can't name 10 white people of all of these things. But when you live in a society where you're part of the majority, your default is to know that they already always exist. And in this short game, we just have to understand that we can't just talk about it, we got to be about it. If we wanted to expand the horizons of our kids, we have to start expanding the horizons for what we think they can be by showing examples of who they can be as well, from people who are part of their own group, LGBTQ+, list goes on and on. With that, I'll take some questions, and then I'm going to close our section out with a poem. I've been a classroom teacher too, so I know what wait time is all about. So I'm good. I don't know if there's a microphone going around, but I can hear you from here.
What was the influence in your life that helped you to get where you are today?
The influence in my life that helped me get where I am today is definitely my parents. My parents, hardcore activists and democratic freedom fighters and made their way from Congo to come here. My dad, several assassination attempts on his life, and they really stressed the importance of education. And then, when I was being bullied a lot, I was a suicidal 7th grader. That's why I do a lot of work in talking with students as well about these things. And reading people like Maya Angelou, like one of my hip hop names is Young Maya, M-A-Y-A, Mighty African Youth Advocate. And Nikki Giovanni helped me get my esteem. And then once I got more motivated, I wanted to motivate more kids. So that's what also helps me get here today. Anybody else? Folks will really go with that Dr. Dre. And they'll say it proudly, too. And I'm like, I literally say
As
what's up?
As a messenger myself, do you believe, after all of these years, decades, and time, that the goal being united we stand and divided we fall, do you think we will really achieve that?
If we want to. Lyndon B. Johnson said that, he said this while he was president. He said, I learned at a young age that if you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than the best colored man, he won't realize that you're picking his pocket. Give him someone to look down on, and he'll empty his pockets for you. Throughout the world, whenever you see a group being oppressed, marginalized, genocides, and all of that, it all comes down to that mentality. We are fighting for small parts of a small pie, not realizing that we can come together and make a bigger pie. And so the work has to have people realize that we have to shift that minimalist mentality. And so the work has to be to change that mentality to get people to understand there's enough to go around for everyone and that it's not a zero-sum game. Like Heather McGee talks about in her book, the sum of us, I believe. And so once we shift that mentality, I find that the world opens up. And so yes, I do believe it's possible. Thank you. No, great question, great question. Otherwise, I'd just be home like playing video games right now. And it's just like, I love this work. I believe, I know we have a question up here. I can't tell if there's any other questions. Right here. And I got my time check here, so we're good, we're good.
My running in heels, by the way.
I'm just wondering about teaching students the difference between good trouble and bad trouble. We had a discussion in our class recently about it, and I was little, like, I didn't really have the words.
Just tell them not to do any of these TikTok challenges, and that's it. You know what I mean? Like bad trouble, TikTok. So, no doubt. So what you want to say to them is you want to encourage them to be involved in work that is bigger than themselves, that serves people other than themselves, that betters the community in the school, in the community, in the city, state, across the globe. So encourage them to think less of me, more of we. And is assaulting this teacher, is that about we? Is stealing this toilet, is that about we? What are you preventing other people from doing by the actions that you are taking? Are you creating work that is building, or are you destroying? When you frame it in that language, they tend to be a little bit more understanding of what the difference is. So that's where I would take it. Anybody else?
How do we go about making people aware of microaggression?
How do we go about well, first of all, we have to understand, we have to define what microaggressions are, right? And we have to ask people, and here's one of the things I suggest. I suggest that, depending on the people, it's really hard to challenge people publicly on this stuff. Because just like I said with the pundits who are talking about race and stuff, they don't have definitions, they're just talking to their social media people. So sometimes you have to pull folks aside, one-to-one, depending on the situation, and explain what's going on and why that's problematic. So, because when you try to do it publicly, it can be a challenge. And I think that there needs to be small group sessions, if you're doing them, continue them, where you can break this down, because I would argue that some people don't even know what a microaggression is. Just like I was talking about these definitions. You got to get to it. Look, I consider myself to be a feminist and part of that movement. But I'm sitting there, I take my car to the dealership to get fixed, and my guy is not there. This lady says, I can take you and get you checked in. I'm like, okay, great. Are you new here? I've never seen you before. She's like, no, I've been here since you bought your car. You could just never envision a woman servicing your vehicle. I was like, well, she got me. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I couldn't argue with it. I just had to be honest. And so those are some of the things I think sometimes the venue is the problem, but work on getting to those common definitions. So my poem is like a little bit over 2 minutes. And I'm looking at the time now, so I think we have time for the question. Yes, awesome. And we got more time in our other sessions too.
Mine's really just a statement. I just wanted to say that I used to do the colorblind thing. I used to go that route and just want everybody to be equal. And I was like, and then I saw these black people being murdered all the time, and I was like, I'm fast forwarding all of the pain and suffering that they're going through by doing that.
Yeah.
And I realized that I was negating all that they were going through, and it was wrong.
And you bring up a great point. I'm so glad you shared that, because so many of us are ashamed of what we thought before about any group. We can't grow as a community if we don't demonstrate that vulnerability. I've had stereotypes, biases. We can talk more about my own in the next session. I have no problem explaining that. Maya Angelou said, once we know better, we do better. And so we want to get to color blindness. We have to understand we're not there. We have to understand that racism, as we know it, is a 600-year-old practice that was created literally to justify slavery, which is why you don't find race described as it is currently before slavery. That's like a history lesson. We got to understand that. It's like when Chris Rock said, I'm black. How many of y'all are willing to give up, being white? And he's like, yo, there's like a poor busboy who's white in a bus station who's saying like, yo, I'm not going to be black because I'm going to ride this white thing out. White is not real. You know what's real? Italian is real. Irish is real. Portuguese is real. Like there's real Italian culture. There's real Portuguese culture. What is white culture? What is white food? What is black culture? What is black food? Senegal is real. Ghana is real. But see, we make up these constructs. There's no white without black. There's no black without white. And we thank you for sharing that. Can I take one more? Yes. Okay. Then I'm going to wrap up with some poetry, some spoken word. Hi.
Hi. How can we bring in the parents so that their partnership in embracing what we're learning? Because that's a big impact on children. So how can we incorporate some what we're bringing in the parents?
Most definitely.
To do that work.
So I do a lot of work with the schools and the parents. And because one of the things that goes off of what you're saying is that schools are realizing that they have to get parents on the same page. You do the work with the students. You do the work with all of y'all. But the staff, so you got to actually bring the parents in. You can't just send home newsletters and emails and all of that. You got to have sessions like this. You know what I'm saying? Where they can vocalize their opinions and issues and frustrations. You see all of this stuff happening in these school board meetings and stuff. Parents are looking for an opportunity to express themselves one way or the other. So you got to make this space. If y'all come up with a diversity style dictionary or you already have one, they got to see that too. They got to sign the contract of something saying that we agree that these are what the definitions at the base mean before you do anything. So look at more of that engagement style, and I think that's how you start to bring them in. Because look, no parent wants their kid to become a hashtag for the wrong reasons, you know what I'm saying? So a lot of parents want to learn how to become upstanders as well. So, and speaking of that, as we wrap up, I love your middle school upstander program, but I'm like, yo, why can't we all be the Gates Child Light upstanders? Like, expand that to, like, everybody. Because if you're not an upstander, you're a bystander, just like you teach your middle school students. I love that. They must be really awesome. Are your middle school awesome? I know, is the elementary school awesome? Is the high school awesome? Yeah, I feel the vibe. I feel the vibe. See, like I'm representing. I feel the vibe. You know what I'm saying? So that's where we got to move to. So let's wrap up with this poem before we go into our breaks, and then we're going to continue in our sessions. So everybody repeat after me. I know if I believe, I can and will achieve. The past is the past. The past is the past. I will no longer regret it. I will focus on this gift, which I call the present. I will get out of my own way and live my best life starting today. If I focus on my dreams and not my sorrows, my trials today will be my testimony tomorrow. They say that greatness is a choice, but what have you chosen? You've been frozen in time and broken in mind. For too long, the same song playing in your head, living in breath, but better off dead. But who said that you didn't have the power? Who said this is not your hour? You've been showered with a steady stream of words that kill your dreams. But since you're still breathing, then someone has lied to you, tried to deny you of your own potential inside you. If you just decide to, let no one deride you. Don't even let them get beside you as you unearth the new you. Stop listening to naysayers and decide to do you. No more pity parties, sob stories, and boo-hoos. If no one told you that you're great, then let me be the first to. If you develop the thirst to drink from Faith's fountain, you develop the might to move mountains. You see, we remove tons of dirt to find 1 ounce of gold. So I ask you to remove tons of hurt and just uncover 1 ounce of your soul. You'll set yourself on a true path of excellence, getting out of your passenger seat and driving your own car, reaching for the moon, but maybe only landing among the stars. You see, you have greatness inside you, but you must choose to be great. Blaze a path of excellence, be great. Blaze a path of excellence, leaving fear in your wake. All you need is already inside you. You just must believe in yourself. Grow towards your greatness, Gates Child Light, and discover your true wealth. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dibinga. We are going to dismiss for the first transition to the first breakout session. Those of you who are in Dr. DeBinga's upstandard presentation for session 1, you can remain here or go outside to use the restroom. Peer leaders are ready and waiting to everyone else navigate the high school on your way to your session elsewhere in the building. Have a great day learning together.
So I hope that some of the things that we shared for the first session we found to be informative. I started off the last session with a poem, and I'd like to do the same here as well, as we go a little bit deeper, these upstander conversations. I'm the child left behind, so I rhyme. I didn't pass the test, so I dropped out of line, out of sight, into crime, just trying to get paid. They cared more for my grades than they did for my grades. I didn't quite look the part, plus they didn't have art, no foreign languages, no music, not even Head Start. So when the shotgun went off, I didn't run, I stayed. School was just daycare, so I ran and played. I acted a fool in school, then I thought I was cool. Made a point to act stupid and I followed the rules. Till I got held back and the joke was on me. Some other brothers hauled off to special ed. Supposed to be case by case, but too many black males make up special ed. It's like a school jail cell. They say the first shall be last, and that's true in class. Original man at the bottom of the education class, so he's locked up. I wrote this, first of all, as a remix, so I do mixtapes, full disclosure. And I did a remix of an Akon song called Locked Up. And so I rapped this to that beat. And I shared this because it took me back to my 7th grade year where I had to repeat my 7th grade year. We had 35 grades on our report card. 27 of them were Fs. Because we had gym, and I passed gym. I balled. I'm nice. I'm still nice. But because I was looked at as this underperforming student, and growing up in this community, being black, poor community, stereotypes and the like, a lot of people just assumed that that's how it is. Poor, black kid, and this is what's going to happen to him because he doesn't care about school. Nobody in my school cared to talk to me about what was going on with my life that year. Yes, growing up in a poor, crime-ridden neighborhood, yes. At the height of the crack epidemic, check. But no one mentioned or cared to know that in that same year, they tried to assassinate my hero, my father, who was away from our house and was in a coma that entire time because they bashed his head in with a crowbar. And he was completely absent from my life. The narrative of black men are just not in the home was just normal. So no one looked at the trauma I was dealing with during that time. It's not a coincidence that same school I got held back in, that I graduated from Boston Latin School as a member of the National Honor Society, in large part because my dad came back. But that story didn't seem to matter to people. Chimamanda, many of us have seen, her incredible TED Talk about the dangers of a single story. And we have to ask ourselves, what single stories prevent us from being able to see the kids we come across as what they can be? Do we see them for what they are right in front of us or for what they can be? Like that principle I mentioned in the last session, do you see the potential prisoner or the possible president? And why do you see what and who? So that's where the roots of this came from. So this is just a review of our enduring understanding and our essential questions, kind of dealing with our ground rules. The ground rules are so important, you all, because we're dealing with so many sensitive topics. Even if you don't agree to my ground rules when y'all are doing this work, you got to set something. You got to set standards. Because if you don't, y'all are just going to run amok. And for the question that was asked about the parents, we know that our parents, just because they live different lives, they're not involved in this education, they're all coming in with a whole bunch of different things. Set stuff off from y'all are sports. How many of y'all are sports fans? Any sport. You have people get into these arguments over who the greatest is, right? And people will get into, yes, Michael Jordan, I heard you, yes, thank you. That's right, I hear what I want to hear. And people will get into like fist fights over this stuff. They'll lose friends over this stuff. I got a relative, I can't even say anything about LeBron. It's like talking about Beyonce. You know, you talk about Beyonce, like the whole hive will come at you. Like I talk about LeBron, it's like, yo, it's like almost fighting words. And I like LeBron, but it's like you can't even critique him, like, yo, anyway. But what you notice is that when people are talking about the greatest singer, greatest athlete, greatest politician, greatest activist, they never set the criteria. Once you come to a common definition, a common criteria, there's no argument. Like people could have saved themselves a lot of bloody noses if they just came to a common agreement. If I say the best basketball player ever is based on who scored the most points, there's no argument. It's Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. You can't fight over that. If I say it's over who won the most championships, you can't argue over that. It's Bill Russell, because he won 11. You know, and so it's the same thing with musicians. You base it off of albums sold, Grammys won. Set the criteria. For these conversations, critical race theory, all of this other type of stuff, set the definition. So people walk in and say, when you say critical race theory, this is what you're talking about. Now, is this what you mean? No? Then fine, you got to give me something else. You got to do that. We have to understand that. So, again, we talked about this as well. This is framing what we're talking about today. So, I'm a better poet than I am an artist. Pretend that's an iceberg, and those blue things are like water. Okay? I'm just saying. Our challenges that we deal with when we come to talking about upstander versus bystander behavior is that we have all of these things that are at the surface, and we don't spend enough time talking about what's under the surface. How can we? We got tests to teach, you know, we got curriculum, lesson plans to do. We got to make sure we're getting to our route to get these kids. We got to make sure that the building is clean. How that? But all of these things that undergird our culture is where we get into a lot of these conflicts. You know, I come from a culture, and many of y'all who come from immigrant backgrounds probably come from a similar culture, or many of y'all who come from military backgrounds may come from a similar culture. I come from a culture where you don't look adults in the eye, right? Where you don't call adults by their first name. But what do we do in class? For kids acting up, look at me when I'm talking to you. And if they don't do that, rather than learn why they don't, we kick them out the room. We put them out, rather than understanding the differences. And I'll let y'all know, this follows all the way up the ladder. I've never called a teacher by their first name until I was studying for my PhD and I was in class. And I was like, wow, everybody else is doing it. It's like, it was pre-TikTok, right? I'm like, let me try this. Can I call her by her first name? So I said it one day in class. I was like, so Barbara. And when I did it, I felt dirty. I felt like I needed to shower or something after it. You know, and I never did it again. I always said things like doc, right? But see, because of where my cultural background, it didn't allow me to get as close with the teachers as some of my other fellow students. And so I was always reserved. That's happening right now in our classes now, maybe with our Muslim students, maybe with students who may come from a different socioeconomic background, maybe students who come from a culture where they're females and they don't have male teachers interact with them. We got to do the work to go under the surface to understand that. So we're bringing out a situation where every student can be their best. And if we don't do that, again, starting with question number one, what's wrong with me that makes them look at them in a particular way, we're going to lose them. And that's what we're leading to these cultural clashes today. That's why we're having the fights that we're having today on so many different levels. It's too easy to blame a politician. It's too easy to blame an athlete. It's too easy to blame a musician. These things are deeply rooted and embedded in us. And so talking about that conversation about creating that bigger piece of the pie or creating a bigger pie, that's what upstander behavior comes in. Because again, like I said, your silence is compliance. And if you are not an upstander, you are a bystander by default. So I talked about this earlier, and I talked about this earlier. We got it. We talked about it, like entire books have been written, aspect of it, and like make some money. Here's a question though. What is that? Someone said a swastika, correct? Uh-huh. Also a symbol of friendship. Okay, so we have a swastika there. What's that? Nazi swastika, yes. In our society, too many times, our perceptions become reality. So, on my left, the first symbol I showed you, that's the original swastika from ancient Indian society and culture. Symbol of purity and wholeness. Deeply significant. I'm talking centuries old. What we get on my right is a Nazi swastika. Going off of this in the first two examples, we put ourselves in situations where we are so caught up in seeing things a particular way that we don't make room for any other possibilities. I know people, some of my Jewish friends, who the roots and the history of the Holocaust are so traumatic that they will never see that symbol that's on the left. I know some of my Indian friends who parents proudly display the original symbol in their households. What happens when they meet, though? Can a person from India walk into a room with that on a shirt? In today's society, of course not. Because our perceptions become reality. And people don't want to spend the time looking after deeper issues. Because we can talk about, these and stuff, but this goes completely different. If I put up an ancient Egyptian cross and a Christian cross, what happens with the conversation? We also have swastikas in areas like Japan and the like. Are we willing to do the work, Gates Child, to go to these deeper levels, to understand that the way other people may see things can be different from how I see things? Well, one of the reasons we can't is because we feel like in this political climate, we're just too stressed. Does the climate make you feel optimistic or pessimistic? And because of that, does it just make you want to feel silent about your stuff? Is this a safe space for you to talk about the challenging times that we live in today? Well, I'm going to say this. Safe spaces are important, and I believe that, what we're doing here is part of being a safe space. But one of the things we also have to do is go beyond creating safe spaces. To be upstanders, we also got to create free spaces. And what I say by free spaces is the idea that everybody can speak their mind on the issues of the day if, number one, we're all committing to learn to build a better community, and if we're going to be openly honest about what we're talking about with a desire to want to change. Because if we don't want to do that, then we can't be serious about this work. One of the things that was mentioned over here about being colorblind and the like is the ability to be vulnerable. Too many of us are scared to be vulnerable about these issues. I'll tell you my vulnerability. Single story, you want to talk about single story and how we grow, how we become better? I grew up with a single story about white girls, white women growing up. I didn't get this from my parents, but growing up in the hood, I was told not to mess with white girls. Because if you mess with white girls and something happens, sexually, and y'all break up, she's going to lie. She's going to talk about rape and all this other type of stuff. You're going to get kicked out of school. Your career is going to be over. All of that other type of stuff. That's what I was told. Now, for me, I've been with my wife since we were junior prom dates. And, she's from Grenada. So I've never dated anybody else anyway. So I've never been in a position where I would, consider dating somebody else. But the single story is there, but then the question becomes the deeper work. What's behind the single story? What's behind the stereotype? Somebody want to give me a name? What's behind the stereotype? Emmett Till. The stories throughout history of the Emmett Tills, killed for whistling at a white woman who acknowledged a couple of years ago that she lied about that, by the way. She's in her 80s now. She lied about that, Carolyn Bryant. real talk. Stories like that. The Emmett Till story was just one story. All of these things that you see throughout history, like Black Wall Street, race riots, all of those things, the hundreds that have happened over the years in this society, because Black Wall Street wasn't the only one, many of those things happened because of accusations of what a black man did with or to a white woman. And that was the stuff that was playing in the head of people in the hood. Now, what changes single stories? Exposure. So when I went to Georgetown and did the undergrad thing, and because in high school it was majority white, but I didn't really mess with them like that. When I ran for class president in the civilized North, people came in the 90s, people came to school with white sheets on their heads in Boston. So, we don't make as much progress as we think we do. When I got to Georgetown, I started getting put in like different study groups and all of that. I had two of my brothers who started dating white women who I got to know on a personal level. And then the single story changed, right? And I no longer have that. What single story, if we had time, I'd do an activity right now. What single stories have you had about individuals? These are questions you need to ask yourself. Where did the story come from? How did it change? Well, first of all, has it changed, right? If it hasn't, how? And if it has, how? You got to do this. How many of y'all, if I was to do this activity right now, could raise your hand and tell me that you had a single story about at least one particular group in this country? Show of hands, anybody? That's just honest. And if we want to be upstanders, we got to start with honesty. Admitting that you don't know what you don't know. And you know why I know that we have these single stories? Because the Washington Post even reported in 2014, 74% of white Americans have no non-white friends. In 2014, 7 years. Almost 75%, 3/4 of white Americans have no non. And I'm sure if that stat goes deeper, it probably had 65% of black people have no non-black friends. The list goes on, but we're all in our silos now, even today. And then you add in social media. You think social media is supposed to be this great equalizer, openness, but the algorithms just feed us more of what we want. So what are you really doing to make yourself vulnerable, to understand and open? How many of us can walk into a room and say, I used to think this about black men, and this has affected my teaching over the years. I used to think this about Muslim women, and this has affected how I interact with them. Can you create that free space to be able to do that? That's how we start to become upstanders. And that's when our students are going to start feeling more comfortable doing this as well. Oh, by the way, if people still have questions from the last session, you can raise your hand and we'll get a mic to you. You can ask them now as part of this session as well, because I know our time was short. So you have to remember that when we're doing this work, you are running a one-person race. You can't worry so much about the next person's journey when you're doing this work. You got to look at the journey that you're on. Like Jay-Z said, your only opponent is you. The only opponent really stopping you from doing this work is you. I was talking to a white teacher at a school just last week, and you know what he said to me? He said, I like what you're doing. You're a cool guy. I'm like, all right, I think I'm cool. Appreciate it. Next. And he's like, but when people talk about this stuff, you have to understand that some of the language that you're using, it's a turnoff. It makes people not want to get engaged. It makes people not want to do the work. When people say Black Lives Matter, they should be saying Black Lives Matter too. Instead of saying white privilege, we should just be talking about privilege. And I said, I get you. I understand that. Because some people experience privilege on their, I experience a lot of racism, but as a male, there's a certain privilege that I have that women don't have, right? So I said, I get that. But I said, here's the problem with what you're saying. You cannot like what I'm saying and still do the work. But if you're going to hate on the language I bring into a situation, and then you're just going to go home and just turn on the game or your favorite sitcom, you are seriously not serious about doing this work, about bringing people together. Because fine, if you don't like what I'm saying, go organize your own group that is focused on social justice and equality. If you don't want to do that, you are not really committed. So even with everything that I'm saying today, you may not feel certain points I may bring up, what are you doing in your space? What are you doing in your social media areas? What are you doing in your classroom to learn new curriculum, to bring in new curriculum, to bring in new speakers, to visit new places, to have more engagement, to become a better teacher focused on equitable classroom practices? What are you doing? Because before Gates Child Line says anything that may come from administration or from the central office, the work needs to be happening on your own. It needs to be happening on your own. So one of the things I want to share is I want to share this thing called LEAD, and then I want to just open up the conversation. All right? I love acronyms. I gave you GROW. Now I'm going to give you LEAD. LEAD can stand for a couple of things. One of the things I like is sometimes I say it means learn everything and do. Because if you learn everything and don't, you are not a leader. Right? So, first thing, we talked a little bit about that listening, but I want to take it a little deeper now when we're talking about upstander behavior. What is it that prevents you from listening to someone else's story? What is it? Only you can determine this. What is it that prevents? See, you remember in the last segment I brought up white replacement theory? Yes? It's kind of like a new thing that people are talking about. It's not new, but it's new in the vocabulary. When we look at white replacement theory, you know what I've learned literally 2 days ago, which I didn't understand? This is what happens when we start to look at reading and learning more stuff. So a lot of people talked about how this white replacement theory or white preservationist theory is this idea that white people feel like they're being replaced, becoming the minority or whatever, and they have to fight that. And so people make it entirely a racial thing. But you know what I learned 2 days ago? There's also a gender component to white replacement theory. Because a lot of these guys who promote it, a lot of these white males who promote it, they also don't want to compete with white women. They don't want to compete for jobs with white women. They want to keep white women in their spaces as well, which is why part of these conversations, these laws that are being passed, and it's not about whether you agree with abortion or not. I'm not having that conversation. But what I'm saying is that people have said that part of that is to keep women in a particular place. And so people know that when they talk about it, when you expand that conversation, you get more engagement. You get more involvement because people start to look at it at a deeper level. It's sort of like when people talk about why do we have Black History Month? Y'all ever hear people say that? But they never talk about why we have other cultural months. They never talk about, why do we have like Asian Awareness Month? Why do we do that? Because people know that with certain trigger words, they're going to get you every time. Upstanders have to be better listeners to go beyond the trigger words. It's not about you agreeing with me. It's about what are we doing to build this community where everybody feels they can be part of it. If you believe in white replacement theory, then we need to have that conversation about where it comes from, what's it rooted in, what are the dangers, and how can we change that? Because we have a diverse population here. If we're having these conversations about male and female and transgender, well, one of the things I noticed on the Gates Child Line website that we might want to look at is that gender is only broken down by male and female. Do we have people here who might identify as non-binary, gender conforming? Can we make room for that, to have that conversation? Or do we keep them stuck in the boxes that we create for them? They'll stay stuck in the boxes if we don't listen. Educate. So one of the things I talk about upstander behavior is I talk about this thing called the Rule of 7. So it's one of the blogs on my website as well. And I encourage you all to ask yourself 7 important questions to really see how committed you are to this conversation on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, you can make up your own 7 questions, but I'm going to give you some. This is how we educate ourselves. Who are the authors of the last 7 books that you read? Are they all the same? Do they all represent a particular demographic? That's not growth. That's not education. Who are they? What do your 7 closest neighbors look like? You want to talk about reading groups? And everyone's reading these books by Kendi and all of these guys on anti-racism and the like. Love these books, great stuff. But y'all can also take this a little bit in a different direction. Y'all need to add books like The Color of Law to your reading list by Richard Rothstein. Y'all need to add books like, is it The Color of Money by Mirza Baradaran? Because it's easy to say, well, people just kind of move to where they want to live and live around who they want to. No. Because historically on the books, it was determined who our neighbors were going to be. I have a Jewish friend who said when she bought her house, they didn't know she was Jewish. And she saw on the deed, because she bought it, I think she said in 84 or something. And it said, this house is not to be sold to anybody who's black or Jewish. Like it was policy. Books talk about these things. So who are your 7 closest neighbors? Oh, let's make it a little more simple. What's the cast of the last 7 shows that you watched? You got children in your lives? What do the 7 last toys that you bought for them look like? What do their 7 closest friends look like? We are products of our environment. We got to do the work to change it. And sometimes it can be as simple as changing the channel to start to educate ourselves on the experiences of different people. If I go on all of your phones, you probably got the same 7 websites you go to every single time. Can we mix it up? Can we do it a little bit more differently? That's how we create this upstanding behavior, going out of your comfort zone into something different. But too many of us are caught. We don't want to do that. So I would encourage you in your groups to ask those 7 questions. Y'all social studies folks in here, who are the 7 authors? Who are the 7 books? What is it teaching? Where is it coming from? What is it teaching? Where is it coming from? Math, so on and so forth. Speakers that you bring in, all of that. You got to do that work. You can't just talk about it. You got to be about it. I challenge y'all to come up with 7 questions on this rule of 7 in your different groups and answer them honestly. Now, once we do that, we start being an advocate. And advocates are simple. You get out and you speak up and you do the work to challenge what's being said out there. If you don't challenge it, how can your students? If you don't challenge it, how can the parents? Are you the type that passes it on to, in many of the schools that I go to, like the custodial staff are also like the guidance counselors? Because depending on the demographic that they might come from, they're more comfortable having conversations with certain kids. And what happens is sometimes people pass people on to the custodial staff because they don't want to have that conversation. Everybody in this room should be able to learn how to be an advocate for our students in the areas that we occupy. And then the last part that we talked about kind of relating to winning is this deciding not to decide thing. Now is not the time to play games. Now is the time to truly have to have an it's now or never mentality right now. Because our kids, with all the social media influences, with all the music influences, with all of the entertainment influences, with all of the political influences, we hear, we're being shouted down every single day. And you know what's really terrible about it? Is that we are part of an institution where facts matter, where truth matters, where history matters. Why are we letting people out there who are propagating ignorance and hate and racism and sexism and all of this stuff? Why are we letting them win when we are the one who have learned how to learn? When we are the ones who have studied, when we are the ones who've gone to get certification and all of this type of stuff. But now we live in a society, was it Isaac Asimov who said this, where people feel like their ignorance is as good as our knowledge. And they're proudly stating their ignorance. We're the ones who are committed to learning, whether we did Whether we did high school, undergraduate work, graduate work, we put ourselves in this position to do this. Why are we letting ourselves be shouted down and put out? We are literally the educators. We can't shy away from that. We got to embrace that, and we got to fight the ignorance, because if you don't fight it, Dr. King said, all it takes is for, evil to prevail, is for good-natured people to do nothing. Why do y'all do this work? It's not for the money. Are y'all balling like that here? I don't know, because every other district I got the paper. It's not about that. You all wake up every single day with a mission to make tomorrow better for future generations. You got to walk in that every single day and be committed to putting yourselves in a position where you're learning more, doing more, being more in order to make that happen. Don't get comfortable. Are there any questions, comments, pushback, feedback about anything that I'm saying? I deliberately kept a lot of the slides short because I wanted to use this time to also have more of a conversation. Because again, you do not have to agree with anything that I'm saying, but we have to be able to have this conversation. Is your hand up? Do we have any mics available? Okay, great. He's coming over the mic. Well, I grab some water.
I like what you're saying about the acceptance of where we've come from. On the opposite side of the white replacement theory, a lot of what I grew up with in the 90s was the whitewashing. Whether you're watching a movie on TV about Pocahontas or you're reading a book about Jesus, those aren't white characters, but they're often depicted by white actors.
Let me give you another one. How many about you or your family members, parents, uncles, whatever, aunts, grew up watching The Lone Ranger? Yes? Okay. The Lone Ranger was based on an actual black person, Bass Reeves. The question becomes, do your parents still watch it if that character's black? Right? So that's another example of the whitewashing. And you said whitewashing, and what was the other word you used? You can say it, I can hear you. It was whitewashing, and you said Pocahontas, and the other one was... And depictions of Jesus and the like, right? Okay, and then we go into movies like Avatar, more modern day stuff, where the characters in the book are Asian and the movies come out and they're white, right? And so, or movies like The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. We got to understand, guys, that these narratives and their single stories that are put out done intentionally. They are done intentionally. I'll give you another one. Vice President Kamala Harris. When she became vice president, everybody was saying, we have the first person of color vice president. That wasn't true. The first vice president was a Native American. Was it Charles Curtis? Forget the name. Served in the 30s. Most of us that I encountered didn't know that. Because it doesn't help with the narrative. First woman, yes, but not the first person of color. I put person of color in quotations because I'm coming back to that after this next question. Because we got to question language. Go for it.
All right. I just, as a big football fan, a few weeks ago, Bill Maher had commented about how, and I'm using quotes, that the black national anthem is played before the national anthem. And he said that he felt like it was going to drive a wedge in the country to have two national anthems, and that at some point, in his words, would all the blacks end up sitting on one side of the stadium and would all the whites sit on the other? I just wanted your thoughts and your take on that situation.
It's interesting because trigger words. When people talk about the black, people know when they throw out black, it's going to trigger people in a certain way. Excuse me. For somebody who actually knows all 3 verses of Lift Every Voice and Sing, like myself, the term black doesn't appear in it once. Lift every voice and sing, till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmony of liberty, right? And so, yes, black people have, sung it over the years, and some have called it that. But people also have to understand that just because it's called that, can we look at the deeper meaning? Because on the flip side, if we talk about, was it Francis Scott Keys who did the Star Spangled Banner? When we talk about that second verse or something that people don't sing, talking about like killing black people because they had captured him. But people want to ignore that, right? And so, number one, I'm into words. So I'm into the roots of the words. But then 2, I'm saying that we have to be better than getting caught up in having that type of racial divide. The name of the song is Lift Every Voice and Sing, right? And so I think that Bill Maher does that intentionally, that type of stuff. So and quite honestly, I don't feel like he's being intellectually honest when he does that. So that's what I feel. I feel like these are 2 powerful songs that speak to America's history. And if there's a third song that derived from somebody else who's Asian American or different, sing it all. That's how I see it. I don't lose, if there's like an anthem that is primarily sung in like the Asian American community, I don't lose anything by having it sung at a game. I gain. Because I learn about a community, it makes me want to go study that author. Who wrote it? Why did they write it? Where did it come from? But when we have this zero-sum game mentality like that, and most of these people never even heard of Lift Every Voice and Sing, all they know is the Black National Anthem. They don't know nothing about James Weldon Johnson and his brother who wrote it, and that's what I think. Now, here's another thing you have to do, upstanders, because we're upstanders, right? Remember, it's not just the middle schools, all of us, yes? I challenge all of you all to challenge the language that you use for everything. So I teach intercultural communication in the School of International Service at American University. It's a requirement for students there. And one of the things I tell students, because these guys go out to be ambassadors and all of that stuff, I said, you need to check yourself to make sure that you're not using language of colonizers. Are we still using terms like developing country, third world, global south? What does that stuff even mean? If there's a third world, what's the second world? What's the first world? I know the answers to these, but I'm saying you got to question that. Y'all got to do it too in these conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion. I've never used the word minority. I never have. Well, number one, my parents taught me as a black and brown person, I was part of a global majority. So I never used the term minority. Minority is a disempowering term. But you know what? Another term I stopped using a year or 2 ago? People of color. You know why? Because people of color, well, first of all, last time I checked, white is a color. You know how I know this? Because there's a thing called Crayola, and they make crayons. And in the crayons, I only know 8 crayons, y'all. I can't get with magenta and fuchsia and all of that. I only know the original 8, old school. Then it came in like 36 and 64, whatever. There's a white crayon in there, so I know white's a color. When you say people of color, in my opinion, you are putting white as the prime, and everybody else is colored into that original, which historically is not accurate. It's Eurocentric to do that. Secondly, you are minimizing the experiences of everybody who is not white. You're grouping us all in. When we talk about the rise in anti-Asian hate crimes because of COVID, that is not a people of color issue. That is an issue primarily for the Asian AAPI community. Yes, some black people have experienced it. Yes, some other groups have. But when we're talking proportionally, that's them. When we talk about unarmed police shootings, there have been unarmed police shootings of white people. There have been unarmed police shootings of Hispanic people. There have been unarmed shootings of every group. But proportionately, it's a black issue. I'm talking proportions. When you say people of color, you're just lumping everybody in who do not have the same experiences. And it's problematic. So what do you say if you're grouping, talking about, well, first of all, I try to make space to talk about each individual group. Imagine that, right? But at the very least, you can just say non-white, because non-white is just, you're not white, as opposed to you're a person of color. It's still a Eurocentric mentality, which leads me to the next word, BIPOC. Anyone heard that one? Like, what? This is like literally last year, in that so-called year of racial reckoning, which wasn't. That's a lie. You talk about lies. So if you ever heard BIPOC, congratulations, but you will. BIPOC. I'll be very honest. The first time I heard the word BIPOC, I thought it meant bisexual people of color. I did. One guy said he thought it was a gay version of Tupac. He did. I was like, okay, what does it mean? And it turns out it stands for Black and Indigenous People of Color. What? So for me, it's almost like a double negative or a double positive, let's put it that way. Because if Black people are people of color and Indigenous people are people of color, it's like you're saying people of color, people of color. And then going back to grouping people together, Black people and Native American communities do not have enough in common to be put together as a group like that, except for any proximity to fighting white racism. That's not enough. There are Black people in this country, there are Native Americans in this country there were Black people who were part of the groups like the Buffalo Soldiers and other groups who slaughtered Native Americans. Why do we have to be intellectually lazy enough to just group them together like that? Y'all got to question that. I'm challenging it all. Disability. Can we come up with different words? Differently abled, differently challenged? Can we start to do the work as upstanders to get rid of any term that is disempowering to a group, that centers one as more powerful than the other? I'm looking at LGBTQ plus communities and I'm seeing this term queer. And I'm like, what's queer about you? Doesn't queer mean weird? But it's like, can we come up with something different? And I understand words change meanings over time and all of that, but I don't really believe that. It's like we get into these conversations about the N-word, right? And the N-word, to a lot of levels, we're going to talk about this now, but the N-word on many levels is actually worse than the real word. Because when people say N-word, it's like you're absolving yourself of dealing with any of these real issues because you just said N-word. I had one teacher, Black student, who said when they were reading these books like Huck Finn and stuff, whenever they got to that word, they would turn to her and make her say it. And I'm like, because the teacher didn't want to say it? Like that type of stuff, avoidance, you don't deal with the real problems. Y'all understand what I'm saying? So upstanders, we start to question about whether the language we use is still appropriate in this new time. I don't have the exact answers of what to use, but I at least know that I'm on a challenge in my life to analyze that. Because again, our comfort zone is our danger zone. Any other questions in our final minutes? You got one here, then right here. Up front here. Right here. You, right? Did you have a question? Yeah.
Yes, I do. Since we're talking about language, I'm here in US for like 10 years, and I've seen it and experienced it. Since every time people see colored skin, they think you can barely understand English, which in fact, like for me, example, I speak 3 different languages and write 3 different languages and speak basic fluent French and write it. But every time I noticed when they see me, the tone of the English becomes, different. So what strategy and how to overcome that, or what, suggestion that you can make to maybe not to look at the skin. And also, once they know you're from third world country, they also assume that, oh, this person or this group of people might be poor or uneducated, which is in fact in third world country, education is the number one.
Yeah, great question. Do they also, sometimes they also talk louder when they see you, like, that matters, right? So here's the thing, and this is bringing this up. Number one, you have to understand that it's not your job to change that. It's the job of everybody else's, right? And so the answer to that is going back to what I said earlier. The less I know about each other, we know, the more we make up. We have to ask, what's your name? Ruby. We have to ask ourselves the question, why do I think that about Ruby? Where does it come from? You know, why is that the first thing that comes to my mind? You know, and you have to ask, remember I said earlier, people are just going to see young black male, older white woman, so on and so forth. The less we know, the more we make up. We got to commit to stop making these things up. But that's the work that other folks have to do. That's not for you to do. Because I know for me, I had situations where when I was doing my graduate program, people who were actually born on the African continent, when they would meet me, some of them, they wouldn't talk to me. And they heard my accent, you know, black American, and they wouldn't talk to me. And then after they learned that, like, my parents are Congolese or something, all of a sudden I became okay. And I asked them one day, why did you think that way? And they said, well, we were taught that when we came here not to associate with African Americans because they're lazy and a lot of them are criminals. This is in a master's program. You would think if I got into a master's program, I'm not a criminal. Like, you know what I mean? I'm not saying I couldn't be, but I'm just saying, it's just like, so again, and so I said to them, you have to do the work to challenge that because you've been brainwashed. And so many of us, we've been brainwashed to see people of different color as lower status. Could it be the networks we watch? Could it be the books we read? Could it be the 7 people who are around us? That's how we have to start to do the work to challenge that. That's on everybody else to do and not for you. And unfortunately, it may not change in the current, but at least we know here amongst our peers, we can start to do that work. Yes?
Thank you again for being here.
No doubt.
One thing I do notice is that the term black and African American often are used interchangeably. But you can be black, well, technically you're brown, which is another struggle that I noticed too, because last time I checked, that curtain's black. My skin is brown. But I would be categorized as black. But going back to the point is you can be black but be Haitian. You can be black but be Jamaican. But you would also be, for lack of knowledge, also, oh yeah, he's African American. And I see how even we're using the term black, just throwing it out. So how would you define black?
Well, it's what you said. You know, see, I was taught, when I say black, this is when I say black, I'm talking about the diaspora. I'm talking about all of us everywhere. But even within the black community, we don't believe that, right? So growing up for me, I have this poem. I'm not going to share it now because I don't got time, but there's a video of it on YouTube. It's called The African, the American. And I've had this issue growing up in America of not being African American enough. And then I go to places like Congo and I'm not African enough. And that's the case for all of us who are like hyphenated Americans, Indian American, Irish American, like we're never enough for one group. But as educators, we have to understand that the black Haitian experience is different from the black African American experience. But again, are we willing to do the work to break down our population as African American, Haitian, Ghanaian? For a lot of people, that's too much work. Because you can also do the same thing with white. You know what I mean? But I mean, really, guys? Can we really just break it down to like 5 categories in our schools? Maybe we might need to go a little bit deeper. And here's the thing that really stinks, which we didn't really talk about. Why is it that I can go every school district across the country, and if I was to see a chart of discipline, a graph of who's the most suspended and there was no race attached to it, why can I like automatically assume who represents which group? That's a systemic problem that we got to do the work to change. I had one black student, going off of your point, Ruby, I had one black student who came into a school district and he said, because of, like they heard his accent, they immediately assumed that he was going to be in like special ed. And he spoke 3 languages. His parents were diplomats. But the assumption that was made We got to do the work to challenge that. What's at the root of why we think it? Any more questions? We got like 3 minutes left. Questions or comments? We go to 10:30. Always be mindful of time. Yes, good. I hope some of this stuff is helpful. Yes, go ahead.
My question is, how do you open up that conversation? So let's say you're having a conversation with somebody and they instantly put up that wall of, oh, you're white, and oh, you're a monster. I'll be honest, I'm currently going through that right now.
Mm-hmm.
My husband is a police officer, and I sit and I talk to somebody and they instantly think, oh, you're a monster, you're a white monster. And I sit there and I try and talk to them and I say, you know what? I'm scared too. We have this fear, but we both have it. So let's talk about our fears, put away the occupation, the skin color. Because deep down, we're both scared. And how do you open that up to somebody who's already put up this brick wall of, I can't talk to you, you're a monster?
Great question. 2 points. Number one, kind of going to what I said in the first session, you got to check the environment where you're having this conversation, first of all. Like, this ain't a conversation for in the school cafeteria, or like that, right? But here's number two, and this is for all of us, and I do this a lot. When you don't feel like you have all of the answers, just ask questions. So what I would do in a situation like that, like if I was you, and let's say you were talking to somebody who's a black person, I would say to that person, how do you feel when people automatically see you and assume that you're a criminal? Or they see you and they automatically clutch their purse when they're walking down the street. Or they see you or they automatically think you can't be, say you're talking to a student, you can't be in honors or AP classes, right? Does that feel right to you? Does that feel good to you? Well, that's how I feel when you're talking about my husband who's an officer. You don't know him. You don't know anything about his story. You don't know anything about, he could be in the system trying to make it better for different communities. You know what I'm saying? And so what I suggest all of us do is ask for people to give you a little of the humanity that they want you to give to them. Because they can't assume that just because you're white, this is the side you're on. Because you're a police officer, this is the side you're on. We all know that all police are not terrible. We know that there are people of every profession who have issues. And in none of those professions is that group the majority, right? And so that's how I would start to flip that conversation, because all of us have been stereotyped in some way, shape, or form. And when we do that, they may not get that in that moment, but maybe they may start to speak about it. And shoot, depending on who the person is, maybe even if that space allows, introduce them to your husband. Have that conversation, because even like that, the example I gave you with the white girls at Georgetown, it was when I got the exposure, had to sit next to, had a group, and realized that what I was taught about white girls was wrong. Sometimes it's just going to come from being exposed to the good people who represent that group, and that also helps to change it. So those are 3 of the things that I would do. Someone next to you had a question or a comment.
Growing up, I was taught that having a name that had to do with your ethnicity gave you a disadvantage. My mother gave all 3 of my siblings a white name. And we were taught that when we had children, give your child a white name with a strong tie to your ethnicity in their middle and their last name. We have students who have names based on their ethnicity that are very strong names to them, yet they give themselves nicknames because they feel that it's not acceptable. So how would you go about starting to help that child feel more comfortable to use their whole name instead of giving them a whitewashed nickname?
Yeah, so I'm going to end here. Thank you all. Okay, because you're taking me back to my upbringing, and this is where we are. We're going to end on this point. My brother's name is Carmen Ampata. Growing up in school, he would have people called him Pat. My other brother's name is Kabongo. He would have people call him Freddie. And as they were growing up, and then people were calling me O with my name. And we realized that, as we were getting older, that we were disrespecting our own culture. So we kind of came out of that on our own. But one of the things that's going to help your students is if they start to see themselves and their culture celebrate school or reflected in the school. The authors you read, the people that you bring in, like all of that. Is that a fire drill? Oh. Okay, wrap it up. Okay, so wrap it up here. Okay. I need 90 seconds. I got my clock, so I know I'm doing this right. So they got to start to see themselves celebrated. That's one, because then they're going to feel like the value is there. When people talk about like the model minority, they talk about Asians who change their name and stuff. Part of it is that Asians are smarter, people believe. But the other part of it is that they're the model because they never speak up and they'll never challenge anything, which is also a problem. So you have to make sure that if the kids will see themselves, they'll want to talk more about themselves. And when you don't have access to this stuff in the curriculum or other places like that, you have to show them that type of stuff, because when they say, he's a doctor, this guy has my thing, and she's the president of this country, they're going to want to see it. Malcolm X said, if you teach people that they never did anything, they're going to think they can never do anything. So you have to expose them to more of their culture, and that's going to want them to speak up and be proud of who they are. And I'm speaking about that because it's worked for me as well. So remember, guys, every single day you have an opportunity in some way, shape, or form to be an upstander and not a bystander. Silence is compliance. You have the ability to take our students to the next level, but you first have to take yourself to the next level as well. Thank you all very much.